Good afternoon, listeners. Welcome to our today's webinar on developing a culture of feedback. I am Priyanka Parikh and work as an HR manager at CUNIX Infotech. I manage end-to-end HR functions by building camaraderie relationships with people and help organization align with its people. I am co-presenting this webinar with my colleague.
Hi, I am Rajendra and I lead CUNIX Inspire and love to solve people and business related problems. Welcome to the webinar.
First of all, thank you so much for joining this webinar. We request you to send your queries as and when you have it. We shall respond them in the sequence after the session. Our workplaces are changing. As the world speeds up, there is a higher demand for faster, continuous learning in professional environments. It's always said that unlearn to learn. Learning takes place on a continuous basis. But have you ever imagined what is the key to learning? The key to learning is feedback. It's impossible to learn anything without it. We need to adopt continuous feedback systems to enable faster learning. Not only does continuous feedback improve the general well-being of the employees and managers alike, but the productivity goes up while employee turnover rates goes down by as much as 59%. Isn't that a great number? But when it comes to business success and growth, leaders may feel that the best course of action is relying on other business professionals, partners, or consultants. However, another option is often more convenient and cost effective. Cultivating a company culture that encourages open, honest feedback tends to be beneficial for employees, management, and the company itself. To add a fun element, we have kept a small quiz at the end of the webinar. Participants are requested to participate. Moving further, in our next 45 minutes, we'll be talking about what is an organization culture, feedback perspectives on relationship and culture, what is an ideal feedback culture, what are its benefits, and how to develop one. I hope you all are set for the webinar. Moving ahead, having feedback built into your company's culture has proven to increase employee engagement, which in turn increases productivity, morale, and success. With such a clear link between feedback and success, why isn't everyone doing it all the time? Let us understand with the help of an example. There was an organization named ABC Limited. Over the years, company observed 7% of attrition. But suddenly, in the current year, they observed a sharp increase in the attrition rate to 10 to 12%. This increase in percentage made the management little worried, and they decided to get into the details of it by calling an expert and finding the problem. After initial observations, interviews to people, and analyzing the exit forms of ex-employees, it was found that people were unhappy with the way the feedback was given to them. They did not have any set pattern or processes to give feedback. Some managers did not believe in giving feedback, either good or bad. Sometimes they were scolded in front of everyone for the mistake done, which made them embarrassed and later demotivated and disengaged to work. Another observation showed that there were instances where the employees wanted to give one-on-one feedback to their managers but couldn't despite of trying many times as there was no set platform for upward feedback. Also, the employees were not empowered enough to give feedback to their peers as the organization never encouraged such kind of feedback channels for employees. This reached to a level where people had to leave the organization and that affected their productivity. This opened the eyes of senior management and with the help of the expert, they developed a culture of feedback with defined processes and set timelines. By shifting its focus on developing a culture of feedback, the company found its breakthrough, which led to encouragement, increase in productivity, higher retention rate, engaged employees who contributed towards the overall growth and success of the company. Now, this example clearly shows that there was a link between feedback and success as it goes hand in hand. Now, let's have a look on the importance of developing a culture of feedback followed by a video.
Hi friends, I have a very important feedback for you which you really need to listen and incorporate in yourself. Don't worry, I'm not really giving any feedback here. I'm just reiterating a monologue very familiar to all of us, especially in our corporate lives. Yes, monologue, which is what it becomes many a times. Our feedbacks, sometimes due to an unfriendly delivery, sometimes due to its timing. There may be many reasons, sometimes not even properly known to us. However, what is surely known to us is feedback should be a part of an organizational culture. I'm Vireshwar Joshi, heading business at CUNIX, and I'm here to share my experience of feedback. Feedback. It's a known method since early human civilization for improvement for an individual as well as an organization. Among many other reasons, majorly it is because of the facts A, there is a limit up to what we can see about our own errors. B, there is a limit up to what we can understand about needs of our fellow beings or on ourselves. For every feedback, we should keep in mind that as much as giving or taking a feedback is important, it is equally important to be watchful about how we give and take it. We all need to take our feedbacks every day. The giving and taking is a continuous process for every organization. And this give and take makes feedback a currency of growth. What's termed as currency? We all should agree that it is to be used very wisely. Should be taken from known sources, understandable sources, and not from just anybody, and should not be uselessly distributed either. Hi, friend.
Taking a clue from his talk, it is very important not to just have feedbacks in the organization, but it is very important to have a feedback culture in the organization. Now, when we talk about culture, let's try to understand what does that mean. Shared values and beliefs of the employees in the organization develop the organization's culture. It shapes up the employees' behaviors. Leaders in the organization are responsible for creating it and then propagating it through various methods. On one hand, the unique culture creates purposeful organizations with employees full of energy and enthusiasm. On the other hand, in a lousy culture, the employees are highly disengaged and attrition is a big problem. This the people problem spirals into business problems with client escalations and decrease in bottom line. Peter Drucker, a famous management guru, once said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And we could not agree more. For successful execution of strategy, which gives competitive advantage to the organizations and brings business growth, is based on a premise that organizational culture aligns with the strategy. If that is not the case, then strategy will remain on paper and there will be no change in behavior of employees, which in turn will not change the way the operational activities are being carried out. So, study of culture of the organization and making necessary changes into it over the period of time is essential for navigating into today's business environment. Feedbacks are extremely essential in fast-paced environment where one must sense the future and act beforehand. Feedbacks provide the reality check early on, and if in the organization the pipeline of this ventilator is cut by poor culture, organization is going to suffocate with the lack of oxygen, which is new ideas. And that is why, before we are outclassed by our competitors, the development of feedback culture is very important, and hence today's webinar. So let's move ahead and find out what values you share in your organization. The chat box is open for comment. Please share. Learning, okay. Come on, people. I guess everyone has value written in their organization, whether they believe it or not. Rectification, knowledge sharing, very nice. Transparency and innovation, okay. Okay, thank you for your comments over empathy, very nice. Customer delight. So, but if we check it in a hindsight, we have to find out whether these values are actually practiced. Are they shared one, or it is lying with couple of people or only one person in the organization? If it is not shared one, it won't become a culture. We need to think about it. Okay, moving to the next slide. Uh, Generally, this debate is on, and uh, I mean, subject matter experts at various level talk about it, that whether feedback is because of good interpersonal relationship or it is because of a good culture which organization has created. Generally, it is assumed that openness to feedback depends on interpersonal relationships between two individuals. But the important aspect is what happens after you give the feedback. Is there any analysis on the given feedback? Is there any action item identified on the given feedback? Will you get an opportunity again to give the feedback? Will your feedback be taken in right spirits with other members of the organization apart from you two? Answer to these questions are out of purview of two individuals, but depends upon the culture of the organization. So it is true that feedback depends upon interpersonal relationships, but more than that, it depends on the culture of the organization. What do you think? It's just interpersonal relationship that works, or there is a need of culture? Again, comment section is open. Please share your thoughts. Thank you for your comments. I mean, almost everybody has said that it is the need of culture, and that's perfectly right. Culture is must. That is true. So we established the fact here that feedback culture is the need of an hour, and if we have, that's great. We are going good. If we are not having that, it's time now. Moving ahead.
Okay, now let us understand what an ideal feedback culture looks like. A feedback culture is essentially a workplace culture that is focused on honest feedback between employees and managers, and between managers and the executives. This sounds pretty simple, right? A feedback culture should be easy to implement. Naturally, that's not quite the whole story. It takes time to grow and develop. Why so? Because most companies have never had a true feedback culture. However, building a healthy feedback culture is absolutely critical to the long term health of your organization. Now, let us have a look to understand why it is important. An organization with no feedback culture believes that giving and receiving feedback is a management overhead. They feel that managing it on a regular basis is difficult and a very big task. Therefore, they believe in doing it once a year. They feel that giving feedback regularly takes too long time and affects other work. Also, few employees have the fear of giving honest feedback as they think that they will be punished for speaking their minds, especially when it comes to giving upward feedback, thereby restricting the environment of openness and honesty and encouraging irregular feedbacks. Such kind of culture doesn't have a motivational factor of recognition, which leads to disengaged employees. Feedbacks are meant for improvement and learning purpose. But certain organizations just focus on giving and taking it. The analysis is not done, which stops the organization and individual growth. Now, let us look at organization with a feedback culture. Research shows that organizations that have a feedback culture reported 14.9% lower turnover rates that resulted into employee development, improve in productivity, recognition, and open communication. It sees as an opportunity to give and take feedback so as to improve and work better, be it a top management or a lower management. Organizations that values giving and taking feedback irrespective of the level in the organization structure. It acts as a source of employee engagement, resulting in excellent performance and productivity. Millennials focus on continuous feedback with shorter and more informal meetings every month or two. This regular setup helps reinforce the importance of it. Organizations provide valuable resources required to enhance the skill set and capabilities to improve and perform after every feedback session. So, this was the benefits of having a feedback culture. Now, let us understand from you all that is there a culture of feedback in your organization and how frequently do you receive and give feedback? The chat box is open for the comments. Well, I have received few responses which says that there is no upward feedback system. Few of them say that they hesitate to give feedback to their manager. Feedback happens only once a year. Okay. Continuous feedback is not encouraged. Well, there are participants which have agreed. They say that there is a two-way street for feedback, that is upward and downward both. Okay, so majority of the responses says that there is no feedback culture apart from 1 and 2, and rest hesitate while giving feedback. Thank you participants for your responses.
A technology company having 800 people spread across Mumbai, Bangalore, Noida, Singapore, Paris, and San Francisco has appointed Mr. Aditya Jain as its new CEO. Aditya is a computer science engineer and MBA from Stanford. He has headed cloud computing business at another technology major. He was working in US. After becoming CEO of this company, he has relocated to India. He will be based out of company's headquarters in Mumbai. During the first month of the work, Aditya was trying to get hold of functioning of the organization. He made a point to travel to all the locations of the company. He was also simultaneously gauging the culture of the organization. He has studied various reports generated in the organization. He found out that rate of attrition, customer complaints are increasing day by day. He found out that innovation is going for a toss as new product development is stalled from quite some time. He wanted to understand the cause, so he tried to take a feedback from his direct reports. No one was speaking anything on the problem. He tried to discuss this with other members as well, but no one talked about the problem. They were all trying to paint a picture that all is fine. He hired a consulting firm. find out to take 360-degree feedback, but all in vain. No one was really ready to talk about the real problem. He took a decision to hire a consulting firm to find out why people are not ready to give feedback. They found out that the organization do not have a culture of feedback. They found out that previously when they have tried to give feedback to the management, it resulted into killing the messenger problem. Peers don't take feedback as they know management do not believe in that. Management rarely gives feedback and rather makes it a pump and show exercise. Overall, the environment is toxic and people have grudges. Aditya has given consulting company a take to implement feedback culture aimed at primarily developing positive environment in the organization. We shall cover in our next section on how to develop this culture. But before that, would like to list out some of the benefits. So we have written some of the benefits here. It's not exhaustive, but indicative. Taking the first benefit, feedback culture builds employee centricity. Employees are empowered to share their thoughts and ideas, which motivate them to think and connect more. Plus, they also know that some action is going to be taken on the feedback. Also, gives managers an opportunity to discuss improvement plans with employees. Environment of trust builds between employees and managers. Feedback culture builds positivity at workplace. It is because it opens the channel of communication, which boosts the employee performance. Feedback culture is extremely helpful in decreasing the turnover of the employees. Continuous employee turnover is, a huge cost for the organization. When employees can give honest feedback and get feedback about how they can improve, they are less likely to leave. Fourth, a feedback culture can help improve internal communication with employees. When a company focuses on being open and honest with itself, it's easier to communicate corporate objectives, goals, and areas of improvement. Clear, transparent communication between employees can help boost productivity as well. A feedback culture helps in employee development. It enables employees to work on their interpersonal skills and the skills required for the job. Lastly, a feedback culture helps in tracking the goals more closely and the factors which influence in the achievement of these goals. Understanding early on some factors which can be potential obstruction in achievement of goal can be helpful for the management to deal with it.
Okay, as I explained earlier on how a feedback culture looks like, here are a few elements on how to develop such kind of culture. Firstly, emphasize on openness and trust. It is very important for the people to feel a sense of openness and trust. Employees should feel free to share candid feedback with their managers and peers without any kind of fear of being punished. If the organization doesn't take steps to ensure that this happens, then the organization culture will start falling apart. To create such kind of culture, following things should be done. Firstly, get to know each other. To encourage such kind of culture where two-way feedback starts, it should always start with a small conversation with the colleagues by making an effort to understand that colleagues as individuals. This doesn't require a great deal of time. Just talking a moment to ask about someone's weekend and occasionally sharing stories of your own. By doing so, it will help to create a culture of openness. Secondly, talk about emotions. The ability to discuss about emotions is a critical feature in any organization that aspires to share effective feedback. Not only because feelings are at the heart of most difficult feedback, but also because feedback inevitably generates difficult feelings. When we can talk about our embarrassment, disappointment, frustration, and even anger, the culture is sufficiently safe and can handle real feedback. Thirdly, make it okay to say no. A risk in such kind of culture is that people feel obligated to say, of course, when asked, can I give you some feedback? The freedom to postpone such conversations when we are not ready, to have them ensures that when they do take place, all participants are the willing parties. It is always better to say no if you are not ready to give or take feedback. Secondly, balance critical feedback with positive feedback. We often think that good feedback is honest criticism, but that's just the half story. The other half is truly meaningful positive feedback, which is all too often absent in the organization. You can't have one without the other, but so many obstacles prevent us from offering and accepting positive feedback. So we need to practice it. To do so, offer some positive feedback and stop there. One must always start with some positive note and not a critical one. Encouragement for giving positive first should be more and emphasizes on the areas where the employee excels. Constructive feedback should be given after the positive one with some areas of improvement. Secondly, start small. We miss opportunities to provide positive feedback every day because we have this idea that when something big is achieved, at that time feedback plays a role. Lastly, praise efforts and not the ability. Research suggests that praising persistent efforts, even in failed attempts, helps build resilience and determination. Third point, normalize the process of giving feedback. Feedback is something that happens at unusual times. Say, like, during performance appraisal, it will never really be an organic part of the organization culture. It has to show up in everyday life. To make feedback normal, don't wait for a special occasion. As it is said that don't build a castle but put 1,000 tents, and that certainly applies to feedback. Don't turn it into a complex or cumbersome process. It just takes few minutes and make that happen. Lastly, emphasize personal accountability. Feedback should always be two ways, that is, give and receive, upward and downward. As leaders try to create a feedback culture, they need to walk the talk. This means even they should be open to receive feedback from their employees or colleagues and should be willing to adapt to this culture of top down. To walk the talk, you need to be transparent. Everyone around us, maybe colleagues, superiors, direct reports, should know that improving at giving and receiving feedback is an ongoing goal of any organization. Lastly, ask. We can't just sit back and wait for the feedback to be offered, particularly when you are in a leadership role. If we want feedback to take root in the culture, we need to explicitly ask for it. These were the few elements to develop a culture of feedback that helps individuals and organizations to learn and grow, which leads to success. Being clear on what good feedback is and what isn't, training staff in giving and receiving feedback, and making sure a consistent feedback culture is built. Let us understand from our expert what a good feedback is and what isn't.
I would like to take you here through my own experiences of do's and don'ts of feedback. Talking about do's first, as I said, it is a currency. So there has to be some GST associated with every transaction of it. This GST namely is about being genuine, specific, timely. Genuine. Feedback can't be a criticism or a praise. Simply, it has to be constructive for enhancement, for growth, and therefore should be well delivered, empathetically thought, and with approach of finding a solution together. Specific. I can't be ambiguous or too sharp in my words, or use feedback as an opportunity of pointing fingers and then expect to work it positively. Like, whenever I could give feedback to my teammates at a right time, like keeping it face to face amongst right set of people on a positive note and a time where both the parties are heard and both the parties can try to conclude on a positive note. It worked wonders. Coming to notes, traditional disbeliefs associated with feedback are harshness, on the spot, seniority, and sympathy. Harshness. There is a colloquial, truth is bitter. As far as feedback is concerned, this is a false belief. And by generally believing in this, we sometimes let our feedbacks become harsh, as if it will be non effective, will not work at all without being harsh. In fact, we are from a culture which believes Satyam Shivam Sundaram, meaning truth is beautiful and not distasteful on the spot. With the notion of being busy, one can never deliver a progressive feedback. Feedback should always be a setup where it can be a conversation, well practiced, and showing belief the receiver. The senior, I don't need to ask. It's a mistake which I myself made with one of my teammates, and I ended up finding that the same piece of advice was given by three other seniors also. No need to say, it made it even more difficult for the receiver to absorb it. The thing, the efforts of being polite during our feedback. Now, this is the other extreme. That while giving feedback, we show sympathy. Rather, we should try empathy, where we give people benefit of doubt. Don't corner them. Understand that they themselves know their own mistakes, and a progressive feedback will suffice the purpose. Lastly, if I have to select one epoch-making factor above all, my vote goes to being genuine, as it is the most important thing while giving a feedback. Unaccompanied by genuineness, there can be many things like body language, selection of words, pitch of talk that can sabotage the overall purpose. It was well said once by a corporate coach, and I quote here for feedback. Here personally, don't put people in boxes and leave them there.
Before we move towards the Q&A part, as promised earlier, let's engage into a small quiz. Firstly, in order for your feedback to be heard and used, you need to deliver it at the right time and in the right way. To do that well, you need to understand what makes feedback most effective. To make the feedback most effective, join our next webinar on the art of giving feedback. Now, as promised earlier, let's engage into a small quiz. The first question here is, which of the following feature does feedback culture not have? The options are sporadic feedback, continuous feedback, irregular feedback, and once a year feedback. Participants, kindly answer those questions. Moving towards the next question. An ideal feedback culture is one where management tries to save time in activities like giving and receiving feedback. True or false? Okay. So the last question. Which of the following means kill the messenger? To get angry at someone for delivering bad news? To judge someone for not performing as expected? To putting someone down in front of everyone? To demotivate someone for not appreciating? Thank you, participants. So everyone likes a good surprise, right? So we are specially giving a winner to attend 1 day free training on conflict management. We shall announce the winner via mail, and the winner would be attending our free training. Now, I would like to open the floor for question and answers. Please post your question in the comment section.
Okay, Priyanka, I have received two questions.
Okay.
Question one is, do we need formal or informal environment for feedback?
Okay.
If you can
So,
throw some light on this, that would be great.
yeah, right. Thank you, Rajendra. So definitely, a formal environment is required for a feedback culture. So as it should be a stress-free environment, as one of the important things is giving and receiving feedback. So after every feedback session, the management is going to receive some kind of inputs, and out of those inputs, it will help the management to do some kind of analysis, and depending on those analysis, some actionable plans should be made. So definitely a formal setup of environment is required for a feedback culture.
Okay, and one question is, how do you train the employees to accept negative feedback?
Okay.
Okay, so I shall take this question. So when we talk about feedback as negative, uh, I would say that we paint it that way, isn't it? That we paint feedback as negative feedback. Feedback is feedback. It's not negative. It's not positive. It's something you want others to improve upon. And I would say more than training employees to accept the negative feedback, it would be better if we train managers on that behavioral aspect, of how to deliver the feedback. As Viresho Joshi told in his video, that if it is genuine, specific, and has some output for the individual who is taking that feedback, I would say that's it. I mean, we don't need to portray it as, okay, so I am going to deliver something very negative. So I would suggest that it is otherwise, that we don't need to train employees on the negative feedback, but rather we have to, I mean, uh, develop that art of giving the positive feedback. However, whatever the feedback is, we have to train employees on how to accept feedback, because that's a major challenge. Whatever type of feedback is, generally when we give feedback, we think about it, right, that this is the area of improvement. So if we give it to anyone, correct. So they don't take it personally, but work on self improvement. That's right. So how to deliver it in such a way that they don't take it personally. Correct. So if uh, if that feedback is not aimed at the the person, if that feedback is aimed at the work, and if you are very specific that at what point of work, if you have short examples, that at what point of work that improvement is needed, eh, avoiding the personal touch, or personal pointers in that feedback, I would suggest that they would take it positively. Another thing is that they won't take it, so you have to develop a culture again. Yeah, they won't take it positively if you are going to punish that person for that feedback. If you are going to punish that person, then definitely that person is not going to that feedback. You have to create an environment where feedbacks are given to excel, not to punish. So definitely there is not one part that, okay, how to improve this giver, or how to improve receiver. It is about creating a whole environment where feedbacks are not dreaded. If someone is giving feedback, it should not be an environment that is a fearful thing. So I would suggest that this question needs more thought on developing a whole environment of feedback, rather than taking the side of giver or receiver. I hope I have clarified that. Okay, one more question which we have received is, who can develop the culture of feedback in the organization? Is it necessary to start from the top?
Okay, well, that's a very interesting question. Um, when we talk about who can develop, so definitely the sole right lies in the hands of the top management. As the organization culture is built by, it's a collective activity which is done by the top management, and therefore the values come from the top management. So they are responsible for developing a feedback culture, which includes both giving and receiving.
Yeah. So there is one more question. I hope Priyanka has answered that question well. Moving to another question, what are the best practices to create feedback mechanism in organization from HR perspective? Okay. Uh, it totally depends on, first of all, it totally depends on the environment you are working in, and how the feedback is perceived in your organization. Now, uh, it will totally depend on the how feedbacks are valued in your organization. If feedbacks are valued, people are doing it real time. They are not waiting for yearly appraisals or something like that. They give feedback on a real time basis on the work, and that is much appreciated. So if you say that what should be the mechanism, feedback mechanism, or if you're talking about best practice, I would say that as Viresho Joshi told, it should be genuine. First of all, it should be specific, and it should be timely. If we are doing all these three things, then I think we are following the best practices of giving the feedback to an individual in the organization. Okay, another question is, individual one-on-one feedback is better or feedback to someone in presence of team? What I would suggest is individual one-on-one feedback is better. Even if you are delivering a good news, you should give it one-on-one. And if you are delivering a bad news, definitely it should be one-on-one. Bad news, I would say that critical feedback if you are giving, it should be one-on-one, because you don't know or most of us don't know the interplay of members of the team. What are their relationships with each other, how they see each other. So if you are giving some feedback to someone who has some not so good relationship with other in the team, probably it is going to be an added demotivation. Anyways, that person is not having a good relationship with other in the team, and then you are giving a feedback to that person in front of uh, that team member. So it is added demotivation. I would suggest that uh, it is very personal in nature. It is intended to improve that particular individual, and it is genuinely for that person. So what I believe is that it should be one-on-one. Okay, another question is how we ensure that feedback given is rational. First and foremost fundamental is uh, we bring in rationality by uh, looking at genuine instances, genuine events. If as a feedback giver, if you don't have genuine instance to give the feedback, if you are not able to convince yourself that okay, this was the moment when someone to whom I'm going to give the feedback was right or wrong, or has to improve in these areas, then I think you should stop yourself from giving that feedback, because then you are going to just uh, pinpoint at something in that person, and it will not be rational. So important thing is that you timely note down that the feedback which you want to give, the event that you have noticed, and and the event on basis of which you are going to give the feedback. So it is very important that uh, you have a good note of the event, and you have clearly identified that where the person has lacked. Now it is very important for this that in your organization you should be aware what role individual has and what competencies are required for that role to that individual. Sometimes in the energy that we have to give the feedback, we forget that that person's role was not to do that thing for which we are giving the feedback. So that person who is receiving the feedback seems like that person is in alien environment. That person is thinking, why this person is giving me this feedback, because that was not my role. So ensure that roles and responsibilities are well defined, competencies are well defined, and you are giving the feedback which is going to impact some of the competencies of that individual. Then you will be rational. Then the person in front of you would be accepting your feedback. I hope we have answered your question. Any more question? Okay, so if you have any more question, you can mail it to us. You have email IDs in front of you. I'm Rajendra. We have Trisha as our colleague in CUNIX Inspire, and Priyanka was my co-speaker over here.
Okay. Thank you all for attending the webinar and have a nice weekend. Thank
So,
you.
if we have not answered any question, we will definitely come back by email. So we have your email, and we will come back to you.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.